first. Okay, hello there, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to our course today on concrete restoration. Today is a relatively special day. June 24th of 2021 was the disaster where Champlain Towers toppled down in Surfside. So to open up, I would like to have a moment of silence, remembering those 98 people who lost their lives and the rest that lost their homes. So it is quite by coincidence that I scheduled this class with Siobhan. We didn't realize this was the anniversary date so much, but a lot of that had to do with concrete restoration. So I'm excited to have Carmelo presenting today. Carmelo is the president of United Professional Engineering, and I am Peggy West. I'm your host for today and organizer. And I wanted to go into a short bit about housekeeping. This is always confusing, but please put your questions into the Q&A box versus the chat box, and we will use that chat box for sponsor information, etc. This is a 2-hour CEU course. You have to stay on for 100 minutes if you're going to get that 2-hour credit. I'm saying this for the managers in particular. And please allow 2 weeks for the credits to be posted. I want to mention to the board members, I hope you stay on, but this is not a certified class for board members. The only class that is certified with the additional 1 hour that you have to take each and every year is the legal update. So this is not a legal update class, but we do appreciate your participation. With that, I'm going to run through the sponsor introductions, and we have someone who has a meeting she has to run to, so I'm going to start with a little bit out of order. We got Diana Olert from Best Roofing. Diana, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Peggy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Carmelo, and everybody who's part of this webinar today. I'm Diana Aller. I'm the Vice President of Business Development at Best Roofing. And I've been with the company for 7 years, and this company's been in business for 48 now. 48 serving Florida. So we're here to help you with absolutely anything you need with roofing, from a simple inspection to a maintenance plan, a question, a roof. We go from little to big. We cover absolutely everything approved by almost every single manufacturer out there. So without doubt, please contact me. I'll be more than happy to help you with any question you have. I want to be sure that you are educated before you make a decision of this magnitude, since the roof is like a very, very expensive asset of your building. So we want to be sure that whenever you do make the decision, is the best one for you. I put all my information in the chat box, and I guess thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Peggy, and everyone who make this possible.
You're welcome. Thank you and good luck. Is that a new title, by the way?
Yes, since last week.
All right, congratulations. All right,
Thank you so much.
She's going to leave us, and I'm going to move on to the wind beneath my wings. I decided to start with Vinteum software today. Vinteum, Laura, would you please tell us about your services?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Peggy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Laura. I'm the head of sales here at Vinteum. So at Vinteum, what we do is that we create and we provide software for community management to either HOAs, condominiums, property management companies, and property managers as well. So what we would do is that we would provide you with a specialized website for your community, especially here in Florida, complying to all the requirements by law, and also, and most important, a resident portal. So on that resident portal, you guys would be able to communicate with your residents, send notices, even set up or hold your board meetings, have your service requests sent over there. And one of the most important and like one of the most basic things for us when we built this software was to make it easy for everyone. This is easy for even non-tech savvy people in your communities, for those who might not be the most tech savvy when it comes to smartphones or emails. We build this platform especially for those people. We have tools such um, as smart calling or text blasts. So even for these, especially for this hurricane season and also for those snowbirds on your communities, these are tools that are really important. And also another thing that differentiates us from other providers is that we will fully provide training and support for not only you guys as administrators or board members, but also for the residents. So you guys wouldn't have to, learn how to handle these systems or softwares by your own. You would have us and all of our support team next to you, teaching you how everything works. So if any of you guys is looking to have a new residence portal or a website, you can definitely contact us. We'll be sending you that information through the chat. I can personally contact you as well. And we also have a new light version where you guys can actually have a free website and a resident portal with a few limitations for sure, but we will be a great option for all of you guys to see how everything works and just try it out on your own.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your time, and get in touch with us on the chat.
All right. And you can find her on the sponsor sheet I send out following the webinar. Next, I'd like to introduce Bob Aleka. He's also vice president for his company at Faster.io. Bob, tell us about your services.
Well, thank you, Peggy. Good afternoon, everybody. Bob Aleka here with Faster.io. Faster.io provides streaming TV and internet through our fiber optic system. A couple of things that make us different from everybody else is one is that when we bring our circuit into your property or your building, it is not a shared circuit. So everybody gets their own port. So it's not shared among the community where most of the providers bring a circuit in and then they share it among the units you have. So if you have a 200 unit property or a 50 unit property, that circuit gets shared among that, which also has a security issue, if you will. We bring a circuit in and everybody gets their own dedicated fiber optic strand right back to the port individually. So one unit doesn't know what the other unit's doing. Very important, especially with everybody using AI today, which you put all your personal history up there and everything else. The other thing we do differently is that our streaming TV allows you to take it wherever you go. So that means if you have TV hit this property and you have a home and you go home, you can take it with you. You can change your address and you'll get the zip codes of that zip code that you live in. You can change it back as well, which is a great feature. 72-hour playback allows you to go back 72 hours on the channel guide and watch whatever you missed, even if you didn't record it. Replay TV, you can start a live program over you. Even if you're watching another program and you jump back to a live program, you can restart that from the beginning. Cloud DVR, which follows you wherever you go. The other thing we do is we give you 20 streams, which means you can have 20 TVs or devices, whether it's a phone or a tablet or an iPad, concurrently watching 20 different movies. A lot of movies to watch at the same time, but you can do that. Anyway, also, we have no limit on the size of the property. We're doing properties as small as 30 units. So if that's something that you might be interested, I'll put my information in the chat and you can contact me directly. Enjoy the class. And thanks, Peg.
You're welcome. Are you getting those soccer games?
We are getting those soccer games.
All right.
If not, then our phones be lighting up.
There you go. USA, we're doing great.
Right.
All right. Next, I want to just mention WRG. That's Water Restoration Group. They are a full service restoration company. Contact on that is Erin Nickerson. I don't know where she's at today, but I'm sure she's on an appointment meeting with one of the condos or HOAs. Next, I see we have Damaris Cabrera on today from Clarkson and Varick, their elevator consulting company. Are you there, Damaris?
Yes, I'm here, Peggy.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize, my camera, technical difficulties, new computer, new camera too. We are Clarkson and Varick. My name is Damaris Cabrera. I'm the Business Development Manager and for South Florida. And what we do is independent elevator consulting. We don't touch the equipment. We are 100% consultants. We believe that the owners, the managers need the support and the expertise on their side. So this is what we do. We help you with anything elevators. We believe is a very expensive asset to maintain, to repair, to replace, and is grossly misunderstood and underestimated, right? So works 24/7 for 365 days a year, and needs to be maintained like any other piece of equipment. And we are subject, and everybody's subject to these elevator contracts and the maintenance companies, and is a huge lack of understanding of what we're buying as owners in these contracts. So we are here to help the owners and the users and the property managers to understand what they're getting into, what they're buying into. We assess the equipment. We help with the contract to draft and to create that perfect and appropriate maintenance contract. Depending on the aging of the equipment and so on, comes with the expertise of the team. Modernizations, capital planning, etc. Anything elevators, we're here to help. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, and what I really love about your company is that you use engineers. Great. So
Yes,
not
we
just a
do.
bunch of salespeople out there going from a sales approach. So it's a definite technical approach. Next, I want to introduce Terry. Terry is with Allenack Railings. Terry, tell us about yourself. You got a lot of new things going on. Tell me what you're doing for condos.
Certainly will. Thank you, Peggy. Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Berkery. I am Senior Sales Manager for Allenack Metals. We are a provider of high quality, very high-end railing systems of all sorts. Standard aluminum picket railings, glass and aluminum combination railings, even stainless cable railings. In addition, we provide full fabrication services. So beyond railing, we also do enclosures. We can provide just about any type of aluminum and stainless steel fabricated product as it relates to building restorations. Our core markets are condos, high rises. We work with engineers and architects. Occasionally, we work directly with an HOA, but only if that is properly referenced through an engineering firm or a concrete restoration GC. We're located in Palm Springs. That is our primary fabrication facility and our corporate headquarters. However, we've taken on new ownership lately in the last 4 months, and we also have a corporate office in Bogota, Colombia.
Breaking up a little bit there.
So we're not just local. We might Florida, and then we are also working some opportunities on the west coast of Florida in the Naples, Fort Myers, and Tampa area. Been around for about 15 years now. Our founder, original owner, is a gentleman by the name of Guillermo Pabon. Very sharp guy and has done a tremendous job growing the company up to this point. My role with the company is to find new opportunities. And again, our core business is concrete restorations as it relates to anything metal. So ramps, grab rails, stair rails, balcony and patio enclosures, and balcony railings.
Okay. Well, awesome. Very good. Congratulations on that growth, and please say hello to Guillermo.
I certainly will.
And
Thanks,
also
Peggy.
Natalia.
I will.
Next, I
Thank you.
just want to mention City Quiet is also a sponsor here. We have a very busy president. It's a busy season right now. That would be Ben Friedman from City Quiet Windows and Doors. If you need to talk with him, he'll be on the sponsor sheet. Next, I want to introduce a longtime contact for me, industry friend, Tom Acosta from APB Security. Tom, tell us what you're doing for associations.
Thank you, Peggy. We appreciate you guys being here today to listen to our spiel. I'm a sales manager for APB Security, American Protection Bureau. We're covered pretty much the Tri-County area. American Protection Bureau has been around for more than 20 years, and we have a very successful track record. We do just about any type of security patrols, gatehouses, banks, schools, any kind of venue. We even do weddings at times. We're constantly available 24/7. We have a great coverage. One of the things I do recommend is that you need to sit down with your security at least every other month and just have a sit down and a good talk as far as what can we do better? How can we improve? Don't just let a security person just run amok. Just actually work with them because they can help you in a lot of ways, especially right now, hurricane season. You need to be prepared in a lot of ways. There's a lot of crazy things going on, and it's good to be on top of your security company. If they're not providing voluntarily to come and sit down with you, you go reach out to them because it is very, very important. We do a thorough investigation of your property before we take it over, and you'd be very surprised how well we do as far as knowledge is concerned. Please feel free to give us a call and reach out to us. Tom Acosta, APB Security. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next, I want to mention PD Concrete Specialists. They are also a sponsor. The contact there would be Daniel Pena. He is the president. His son is also at sales. Dylan helping out. So PD Concrete works coordination, I think, sometimes with UPE. Next, I want to mention First Citizens Bank. We have Jamie Gelfand. She'll be on the sponsor sheet. She has got loans available, lines of credits available, and she will meet with you one-on-one. And she is a vice president at First Citizens Bank. We also have the paving lady. We have Dawn Miller. She's available to meet about any of your paving needs. We have Nicole Johnson Pendergrass. She is a partner and the COO for Hafer. Hafer is a full-service CPA firm. They do audits, and by appointment, they will be able to take a look at where you've been, what you're doing, and do a full service throughout the year for you. They also have 4 offices around the state. Next, I want to introduce Daniel Baum. He is on today. Daniel, tell us about COA Solutions.
Thanks, Peggy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on concrete restoration. For those of you I have not met yet, my name is Daniel Baum. My firm is called COA Solutions. We specialize specifically in helping condominiums and HOAs navigate their insurance. And especially here in Florida, where building maintenance, restoration projects, reserve planning, and insurance, they're all intersecting with one another. Concrete restoration is obviously a major issue for many communities, not only from a structural and compliance standpoint, but also from an insurance standpoint. Carriers pay close attention to building conditions, especially deferred maintenance, the milestone inspections that we all have to get, the surge reports that we have to get when we have open permits, and of course the overall financial health and well-being, as well as the structural health of that community. I can't tell you how often we get reports back from insurance companies after binding coverage, especially for spalling concrete. That is a everyday occurrence for us. So today's webinar is incredibly important. And the better informed that you are and proactive that a board and property manager is, the stronger that position the community has, especially when it comes to their insurance, marketing for insurance, and looking to find lower premiums. So that's why today's program is so important. My goal is always to help boards and managers understand how these issues connect, and we make better decisions and find ways to lower your premiums. So thank you very much for joining us. My info will be on the sheet. If you need anything or would like me to do a free policy review, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. Thanks.
Well said, Daniel. Goodness, well said. Okay, next we have 2 more sponsors. One is Legacy Life Plan. The attorney for this is Dahlia Anise. She can work with you on anything to do with wills and related items. And she is located on the East Coast, but she does do webinars and does do virtual contacts and appointments, so feel free to reach out to her no matter where you are in the state. And lastly, but certainly not least, I have Munyon. Munyon is a full service contractor for painting primarily, and they are also, again, located around the state. The local contact in the East Coast is Shelley Rovner. On the West Coast would be Shawnee Haas, and both are on the sponsor sheet. I'm going to turn this over now to our moderator for today, Siobhan Gonzalez. She's been in the business now a little over a year, working out there with a lot of condominiums and HOA associations. She is, in her own right, a speaker and presenter. And Siobhan, tell us about yourself and turn it over to Carmelo.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a pleasure to have this time with you all today. You are in the right place at the right time. This is going to be an incredible webinar with lots of value. It's a very important topic, and we take it very seriously. We are at United Professional Engineering. We are a full-service structural engineering firm. So we serve your condo, mid to high rise, from all things building recertification, your milestone inspections, upcoming capital projects. I always share with our clients and our prospects, and even in times like this, that the best time to call us, the best time to inquire, do I need an engineer, is right at the beginning. If you know you have something upcoming, whether it's a painting project, roof replacement, you're seeing issues at your association and the catwalks and, spalled concrete, whatever you have going on, it was once shared, make your friends before you need them. So we are here to establish that relationship with you and be your friend. And, give us a call. We're more than happy to talk with you, meet with you, and see how we can help you and provide some direction and clarity. There's still a lot of questions out there. And, we take this part very seriously in education and, empowering communities so that way they can make the best decisions for themselves. So having those professionals is key. I am very grateful that I get to help associations and clients like you. And I am very grateful that I get to represent United Professional Engineering. So I want to introduce you to our president and owner, Carmelo Giglio. He has been in the industry and serving South Florida condominiums for over 27 years. He upholds our firm with excellence and safety and just a standard that really provides a successful result for our clients. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Carmelo so we can get into the fun.
Thanks, Siobhan. Let me share my screen. Can you see?
Let's see.
Can you see the presenter's screen or the?
Not yet.
I do
Neither.
not.
You see it?
Not
No.
yet.
You don't
So while
see
you're
the screen?
pulling, no, not yet. Mm-mm.
You should.
Let me see.
You don't see it.
Mm-mm. No, not yet.
I don't know why. You should see it. I'm sharing it. Hold on a second.
Sure. So while you're pulling that up, I do want to mention what Peggy shared at the beginning. Please make sure to put your questions in the question and answer box, and we will be answering them throughout the presentation. So this is a really great opportunity for you to, get as much value and information as you can. So we want to have conversation with you. We're here to help. So make sure to use the question and answer box. I will be looking at it.
Can you see the screen now?
Yes,
Okay, you can see the full screen, right?
I do.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for that little glitch. Yeah, this is a continuing ed class for managers. So we're going to try to get in an hour and 50 minutes I'm sorry, it would be an hour and 40 minutes to ensure we get the 50 minutes per hour for your class. So please ask as many questions as possible. This class is pretty long, but let's do our best to fill it up with time. So it's on concrete restoration. I added phase 1 and phase 2 study info in here a while ago. And then yesterday, the findings for the NIST findings for Champlain Tower South came out. As we've said, it's the 5-year anniversary today. And they just finally came out with their analysis, technical analysis findings. So I'll be going over that as well to some degree. Um, this doesn't cover any legal matters or reserve study information, just phase 1, phase 2, and structural repairs. Just a quick outline. Again, the intro, we're going to talk about recertifications. I don't have Surfside in here, but we're going to add that to that, number 2. Then we'll get into building assessments, project manual, procurement, construction admin, and if we have time, we'll do repair examples. And Q&A, please raise your hand during the presentation. I'd be happy to I like taking questions during the class. A little bit about me. I went to University of Florida, I have a civil engineering degree. That was in 99. I got my PE license in 06. My special inspector license was obtained in 2010. I also have a general contractor license that was obtained in 2002. I obtained special construction document and spec writing training and CA training in 2018 under the CSI. I got the CDT designation. And then way back early on in my career, I got inspector licenses. I've been involved with Florida Structural Engineers Association since 2008, actually. And in 2022, I was a state president of FSCA, and then again in 2025 last year. I was involved in Surfside Working Group. I was one of 3 members from FSCA in that group, and I'll talk about that during this presentation. I learned so much from that, being involved. Primarily, it was nice to be involved to know what was going on in the state. I'll get into that more deeply. A little bit more. I have a lot of hands-on construction background, 5,000 hours approximately of digging footings and pouring concrete, setting rebar, tending mason, building homes, etc. So I've got not just the technical, but I got a lot of hands-on experience as well. I've done structural design. Again, going back, it's actually 27 years now. I need to update that. And I've been doing concrete restoration since day one in parallel. And I've got structural design background for threshold buildings. I've been prime professional, and I've actually had the design construction management experience as well. So recertifications, when do they start? We had building failures, as we know too well now. But interestingly enough, Miami-Dade started their program back in the 1970s. They started the 40-year recert program way back. It's been around for a long time. And then in 2005, Broward County started theirs. This photo is from was a clip from the Broward County program that's still out there. But you can see the balcony collapsed, and it's kind of when Broward County initiated their program. This is what the forms look like. This is Palm Beach County is using this. This is what the state created after all the regulation change and so on. There was numerous iterations and who was doing what. And finally, state came up with this, and then the county's using this. Note the percentages down here. I'm going to talk more about this stuff here. For the most case, we're going to talk a lot about substantial structural deterioration. Just know that for the most part, when engineers go on buildings, they don't see this substantial structural deterioration. Okay, and this is also a nebulous definition, but we don't see a lot of that. What we see is a lot of this maintenance needed, but does not raise to the level of, let's say, substantial structural deterioration. Okay, but repairs are needed. All right, and then rarely do a phase 1 passes. I think what's happening is a lot of engineers are passing these inspections despite repairs being needed. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. This is Miami-Dade County's form. They've also gotten into the language of substantial structural deterioration and so on. It's just kind of a bit convoluted, but you can see I have the percentages there as well. This is the one I like. It's from Broward County. And note that in theirs, they don't get into the other. They still talk about substantial structural deterioration, but they don't word it the same way. And they say, are repairs needed or not? cursor. So right in this area here, the highlighted area, if repairs are required, you check that, and you know have to do repairs before you recertify. Um, what's going on is it's changed the things have changed with the state. I'm going to get more into that in a moment. But Broward County, in my opinion, is has the best form right now because of they've kept the language the same as what it used to be back when it was a 40-year inspection. This is again the phase one is a cursory look at the building. It's not a full condition assessment. The engineers are looking at a sample, maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 30% of the balconies, let's say, and perimeter areas, common areas. They're also looking at a typical, just general areas. They're not doing soundings or any testing. It's a visual assessment only, and it's just a watered down structural condition assessment. So, Champlain Tower South occurred, as you know, interestingly enough, we said today's the 5-year anniversary. I was involved with Surfside Working Group, and this is after the collapse. The Florida Engineering Society and the ACEC created Surfside Working Group, and it was just the purpose was to get together and come up with recommendations that the state could use, statewide to make change for the better, to improve safety in Florida, building safety in Florida. So it was when we did the group, it was based on our intent was to not reinvent the wheel, but use what Miami-Dade County and Broward County were already doing, and just kind of extrapolate it out and maybe add some things to it to make it more detailed. One of the things that was brought up during the Surfside Working Group was the cycling. Well, it was recommended that for coastal properties, the first inspection, your milestone, be done at 20 years, and then 7-year cycles. And that's within 3 miles of the coast. And then outside of that 3 miles, you would do 30-year milestone and 10 years thereafter. That was in the paper, if you look it up. The phasing, this is the big one that was also a big one, I should say. The timing, the cycling is very critical, but the phasing is also critical. There was never intended to be this language, substantial structural deterioration. It was always supposed to be a phase one is essentially a 40-year inspection. Okay, that it was supposed to be a milestone inspection, and then if you failed the phase one or the milestone inspection due because repairs are needed, you go to a phase two or a second part where you do a more thorough condition assessment. Okay, so and the requirements for these were set to be for a phase one, since it's not super detailed, a PE or a registered architect could do it. And that's just a professional going in there and saying, are there problems or not? Simply doing that. They didn't need to have higher qualifications. The group thought that it made more sense for a phase two where you're really identifying structural problems and designing repairs, that person should have at least 10 years of structural design experience. Okay, that was recommended in Surfside Working Group paper. That's not the law that was passed. Okay. Also, phase ones were recommended that 33% of the units be entered. This was another recommendation. Just to note for you all, the cycling, especially the 20-year cycle, this was actually from me. This was my input, and I also recommended 33% of balconies be entered. Those are and the structural design experience for phase twos was an advocate for that as well. Just the sequencing of the law change. So the Champlain Tower South collapse occurred. Surfside Working Group was formed. Senate Bill 1702 is based off of that document, Surfside Working Group. I mean, it was almost verbatim. Then what happened was the House came in and did their own bill. It was 769, and that's where substantial structural deterioration surfaced. What happened was in order for the House to accept the Senate's bill, there was a hybrid bill created called SB 4D, and that's what was set to law. Florida Statute 553-899 was created from that. And then we got the Chapter 18, and this statute went into the Florida Building Code, Chapter 18, which I need to check. As of a month ago, it still wasn't in there, but it is in process. Let's see. This is kind of a bit lengthy, as you know, but I'm not going to get too heavily into this. It can be read verbatim online. But it's mainly for multi-story condo buildings was the intent of 553899. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the counties, that's a minimum. That statute's a minimum. Some of the counties have opted to, have these inspections done on other types of buildings, including commercial buildings, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Just as a little example of the cycling we talked about, Florida statute has 25 years for coastal properties and 30 years for inland, and then the cycles are 10 years. It's pretty much across the board. One thing that's interesting is that Highland Beach has kept they did a 25-year cycle and then 7 years thereafter. So they're going with a tighter cycle recommended in the Surfside Working Group document. But the cycles are generally all the same. In my opinion, in the end, I think we got a pretty good deal. We wanted 20 years and then 7 years thereafter. We got 25 and 10 years thereafter. And the intent was redundancy in inspections so that before we had one inspection at 40 years and we've had multiple collapses prior to that. So the intent is to let's do multiple inspections and repair cycles before we reach that 40-year-old threshold. And that's for redundancy and make sure you have multiple engineers, multiple owners, multiple contractors going through the building, and I think there's more eyes and there's a better a possibility that a disaster can be mitigated. So that was the intent behind the 20-year cycle. So you would have had a 20, 27-year, 34, and so on. And so you have more cycles of repair. But anyway, that's that. Again, there's a problem with substantial structural deterioration. And again, some of these slides are a little verbose, if you will, a lot of language. What I was trying to convey is that I'd like these other slides a little better. This is what we used to have, the old 40-year inspection. You had a pass or a fail. If you failed, repairs were needed, and then you fail, you do the repairs, and then you pass. If you don't need any repairs, you pass, and you're good for 10 years. That was very simple. That was the intent of Surfside Working Group. It wasn't to change what was already being done. It was we just called it a phase one and a phase two. So if you do a phase one, which was a 40-year inspection, the two are synonymous. You pass it, you're good for 10 years. If you fail it, you go to a phase two, which is just a more thorough condition assessment. That's all that Surfside Working Group recommended, okay? What we got was this confusing thing where you have a phase one where you do your milestone, and if you pass, you're good for 10 years, but if you fail, you can fail with no substantial structural deterioration or fail with substantial structural deterioration. And what's happening, though, what I'm seeing more and more of is you're getting a pass when repairs are needed. So this is more of what we're seeing, I think, more commonly, which is a problem because what you're having is a phase one is your milestone. The engineer passes the inspection, but repairs are needed, which causes complications down the road with who's enforcing. If you pass the inspection, who's enforcing it? And we've had problems on multiple buildings where if we pass the inspection, but we tell them repairs are needed, nobody's enforcing it. Neither is the building department, by the way. We've had municipalities where we passed the phase one, and I actually reached out to the building official asking him, because the building went dark on us and basically refused to do repairs. And I reached out to the building official asking, what is your procedure here? He went dark on me too, didn't respond. So what we have, we have a bill a law it's making things more safe, but there's still a lot of confusion, and unfortunately change is needed because what we have now is this confusing substantial structural deterioration issue. One of the things, if I don't know if you're all aware of, there's a collapse on April 2nd this year in Hallandale Beach. I don't know the full details of it. This is an image from one of the newspapers. It looks to me like there was some kind of shear failure. Over here were the beams that were coming across from the commercial building were also supported by the garage, and something failed on this side by the garage and the beams dropped. Fortunately, nobody was killed. Interestingly enough, I don't think there was a lot of publicity over this, which was really surprising. This is really concerning to me because number one is Broward County does have commercial building recertification requirements, interestingly enough. Not everybody does, but this is a good example of why it should be done. Um, but what another nugget from this that's concerning to me from the engineer's perspective is what you can't really see is most likely there's a stucco soffit on the bottom of these beams where the engineer had they done a recertification inspection, remember it's non-destructive. So it's just a visual inspection. You walk on site, do you see problems? If you don't, you're good. I could very easily see how an engineer could have walked onto this site, not seen any issues over here at the garage where your shear connections are at, because it was covered by the stucco soffit. And so it's just a little nugget for myself and for others to try to understand that this stuff is very complex. There's so much going on with these buildings, and things are covered up. And we'll talk more about Surfside in a minute. But things are covered up and it's hard to see them. Okay. And I've got in those slides, I'm going to share more on why we've got to be diligent about not allowing repairs to happen, not allowing damage to happen. So NIST came out with their technical findings a couple of days ago. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. And these are screenshots this is a screenshot from the video that they have on their website. Okay. And this was the pool deck at Champlain Tower South. This right here was the south wall. And then this is the building. This is the north tower that collapsed. And so this is kind of like a cross section through that slab. And what happened is these two columns here, I believe, gave out. There was punching shear failure here first. Okay, and then these dropped here, and then what you had is this is the connection at the building. I'm gonna have some more shots here that this connection ripped out and caused damage to the column and then caused other problems. Okay. So what happened is again, this was the punching shear failure at the deck. Now what happens is this is primarily what caused it. There was corrosion around the slab, probably from failed waterproofing over the years. Could have been overload too, definitely part of it. But remember, the building was in service. So there was a punching shear failure that then led to, it was like a domino effect. And if we go back to the other slide, that punching shear failure occurred over here on these two columns first, where there was the worst damage. Within the video, they talk about what was going on there. There was some additional loading. There was under design originally. So these two slabs gave out first, these parts here, and then these gave out, subsequently. But this is something that we as engineers need to look for. We were, we've been on a job recently on a garage where there were a lot of cracks around the slab, and I told the association that we needed to do structural calcs for this, and they didn't like that. They didn't like to hear that. And so we're still dealing with problems with like people and boards not understanding how complex this stuff is, how difficult it is to understand where the damage is, how to quantify the damage, how to understand what the extent of damage is, and how safe is the current condition. One thing that should be noted here, that because I think to myself, how would an engineer know if there was a problem? There was no way to see the top where all the cracks were at, because it was covered with pavers, sand, etc. It was a pool deck, so there was no way to see these cracks. What they did see, I think it was a few weeks prior to the collapse, that there was water coming down here. All that the engineers, perhaps management, owners would have seen is water coming down here and maybe a severe crack around the perimeter of the column that would have been up here at this point prior to failure. What happened was also subsequent to the failure was that there was cracking. I should have taken a screenshot of that. There was a planar wall that moved, the slab dropped, and the planar wall, because it doesn't, masonry and concrete doesn't move, it doesn't flex well. There's a lot of cracks in the planar wall that showed separation, that if somebody had a keen eye before the collapse, it may have flagged, them to think, hey, there's a problem here, but nobody saw it probably. I don't know the full details. I'm guessing that's what happened. Nobody saw it, and they didn't go to the site to check on it. But the point was is that one of the points is that this is not observable because it was covered by pavers, and so I don't know how an engineer would have inspected that if there were no signs below that there was a punching shear failure. Okay, so I'm going to move forward here. So what happened was is that north end of that slab was actually a beam there. This is it here. Okay, and then what happened was is when the slab collapsed, it yanked out, it pulled out, created a concrete void, and it also left an area of the column, right? That was vulnerable. And you can see here there was load testing done, and they replicated a failure where the reinforcing steel buckled. Okay, so this is kind of what happened. This is kind of why the progressive collapse happened. You had that the pool deck collapsed. It yanked on the structure at the pool, which was the column and this beam here in the middle, and then that weakening caused, and material breakdown caused because remember you still have the floors above pushing down, and that weak link, it just dropped 16 inches, and then it just boom, it just initiated that progressive collapse, and that's what happened. That's what happened to the collapse. Here's another image of it where this is the pool deck area that collapsed. This is that planar wall I was telling you. There was some major cracks. I think it was right in this area here. And then they also said that this gate wouldn't close anymore because the slab was deflecting, it was dropping, and and things would start shifting around. So the pool deck collapsed, and then it pulled on these two beams here, like I showed. This is it here. This is that location right here. These two columns. So these two yellow lines are beams. These beams pulled on the columns, and that's when it created the collapse was right there. And this is again, number one was the pool deck collapse, two is the middle part that collapsed, and three is the eastern part. I didn't get into this. Primarily, I was more concerned about this because when we're doing structural inspections, we're looking to prevent a collapse, so I'm more interested, mostly interested in the pool deck collapse and what happened at part two, where what triggered that progressive collapse. But that's what happened in simple terms. NIST spent a lot of money. This right here was they recreated the beam column interaction. So what they did here was you can see this is a diagram. They created this a load test where they're pushing down to simulate the floors of the building pushing down in that area, and then they also recreated the slab where they put in a lateral load, so you're pulling that beam as the load is pushing down, and you can see how that would create a failure. It's like creates buckling, and there's a multitude of things happening, but that's the mechanism that caused the failure. You can see here too the beams and the columns, how they interact, and that's basically what they recreated. So the test was really I thought that was pretty interesting. This is another thing. They had hired a third-party engineer to look at the original design of the pool deck slab, and they found deficiencies in the original design. I think there were problems with the construction. In other words, the construction wasn't built per the design, and so that was part of the problem as well. But I thought this was interesting here that, despite there being under strength, deviations in as-built construction, and then loads added to the structure, they had added the planters. They're saying that there's no evidence of specific initiating event, but it was most likely long-term degradation from corrosion that initiated the collapse. Caused a collapse. And that's all that we're talking about here with concrete repair. It's all about corrosion and the degradation of the concrete because of corrosion. And that's all this is about. And that's why, we'll get more into why we do what we do, and why this stuff's necessary, and why you can't let it go. You can't wait forever to do repair cycles. You've got to do them. And now we have a law that forces it, but it's a long time coming. So some takeaways: building owners cannot lose control of the design. Even though CTS may have had some under designs, it was in service for 40 years, Degradation from corrosion was a major contributor of the collapse per NIST. Cannot lose control of the design. That's what I try to tell people is it's so hard to wrap your head around this stuff. It's extremely complicated. I'm going to get more into who's most qualified to do these inspections because it's so complex. You can't wait 20 years for repair cycles. Now we have a law that won't allow that, but believe me, I've seen it. I have an example. I tell people whenever we're talking about Champlain Tower South, I went and gave a proposal to a building down in Surfside. It wasn't CTS, and I honestly can't recall, and I tried to find the proposal. I can't find it. But when I went down to that site, I was a younger engineer. This is around 2006, 20 years ago. And at that time, that building was 40 years old. Okay. The building official was the board member that I walked the site with told me that the building official was about to condemn the building because they needed to do repairs. I walked the building with that guy and I had my hammer with me. I sounded out some concrete and the level of damage was extreme. I asked the guy when was the last time he did a repair cycle, a major repair. He told me never. So it was a 40-year-old building that never did one repair cycle per this director. That's unacceptable. But that's what we're talking about here. That's what's got to end is where people just keep, and it's post Surfside. They just want to cancel projects. They think engineers are lying and telling story. It boggles my mind, but it's still happening. You can't ignore qualified structural engineers. I have many stories, I just said, post Surfside, where owners still think engineers are creating story. We tell a board that there are issues, and they seem to not want to believe us. It's mind-boggling. I've got multiple stories of it. We
Can I
simply
ask a
can't allow.
question?
Yeah,
I just wanted to ask if you think that these delays of long time maintenance came from the uh, financial side of people's,
I
mental awareness. I mean,
absolutely.
okay.
It's all about the money. No, they don't. They simply don't want to spend money, and it's. I've said it a million times. It's human nature. If you gotta put out the cash, it changes something in your rationale and thinking. And we need to do a better job as owners to be objective and put money aside and think about what is this expert saying? I'm telling you, I've got a story. I could talk over and over again about multiple stories, and it's all about money. That's what it's about. They think we're creating story. They meaning boards and owners, by the way. I mean, I need to be careful on that because most of our boards actually are. It's not. They're okay with the repairs. It's the problem is when you have an association with the mentality that the engineer is always wrong. And those are the dangerous situations. The one that I'm telling you about that I experienced in Surfside, where that's dangerous. And I think for the most part, most boards are responsible enough to not do that. What you have are over and over again, you have unit owners that don't contribute to anything, complain about everything, and create problems. They're the ones that don't want to do the work. We've had this on multiple jobs. These people are come out of the woodwork as soon as money needs to be spent, and they think they're the expert. It happens over and over and over again. And I don't know the full story at CTS, but I tell you my own personal experience. As soon as that building collapsed, I thought about that building down there that I went to and how I knew the mentality of some of these people is they simply don't want to believe what I'm telling them. And I know there's a lot of good engineers out there and they're getting the same treatment. I know because we're on a building right now that they had fired the engineer and the contractor, canceled the project. 2 years later, we're on that building. We've had to put an emergency shoring in that building because it needed it. And this is very close to Surfside. You can't make this stuff up. It's bonkers. It is bonkers, and it it's not a joke. I mean, I was updating this I was watched the presentation, the NIST presentation, and it's just it's stressful. We get up every day and do this stuff. Our lives, people's lives are at risk. Our lives are at risk. Our livelihood is at risk. It's as serious as it gets. I mean, it's no joke, and it seems like a lot of people, most people, it seems like they don't get it. I'm not sure if that's fully true, but it feels that way when you on every job you present an estimate for repairs, and it they bark about it oftentimes. I
Well, I
could go
think that
on and on
also
about it.
goes to why they changed the law back to required reserves so that it forces everyone to save a little bit, which seems to be that exactly, just a little bit, even if they were to save from day one, a dent in some of these amounts, but it sure does defray the cost of some of these repairs. So reserves are just such a valuable part of maintenance. Um,
No,
you know,
it's essential because people simply I've said this where human beings need laws to protect ourselves from ourselves. We need laws because it's that objectivity. Once it's your money in your pocketbook that's paying the bill, people, it's like human beings' rationale changes. My situation is different. I don't need to spend the money. And it's a fascinating thing to see. And I don't nothing's changed with that. Nothing will change with it. But what we do have is a law now that you have cycles, and that we still have this messy thing with substantial structural deterioration. I could talk for hours. And Peggy, you and I have talked about doing other presentations, but I could talk for a long time about that. It's just bonkers. And maybe we can have a little bit more time today. If people have questions, I can get more into it and sort of talk off the cuff, if you will. But
So, Carmelo, we have some questions piling up in the chat.
sure,
Um,
please.
all right, great. So it is a couple are talking about the example of the Champlain Towers collapse. And so it says, one of the questions reads, would it be good practice to design the pool and building structures as independent elements?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There should be a expansion joint. I'm certain of it. I mean, I come from structural design. I'm a structural PE, and absolutely. I mean, that's one of the first takeaways. I thought to myself was like, man, you got to, we've got to separate the pool deck from the building, from the vertical. And, by the way, one of the things, horizontal surfaces are the most vulnerable with this because water sits there on whether it's balconies or a pool deck or any kind of horizontal surface because that water's sitting there. It's just it's simple. And right, the water penetrates down into the concrete, gets close to the steel, and then it starts corroding the steel, and you've got these massive problems. So yes, absolutely, there should be an expansion joint separating the pool deck from the building. What else do you have?
Very good. Next question is, what is causing the corrosion? Oh, sorry. What is causing the corrosion? Water intrusion. How important is frequent caulking and waterproofing, even if it looks like it's not needed?
Yeah, it's important because if you want to stop the water getting to the steel, water and air and salt. That's essentially it. And that's why you have aggressive corrosion on coastal properties because of the salt, And so it's simple mechanics. I mean, water mechanics, just the concrete's naturally going to crack. What's important too. There are a multitude of things why the corrosion is occurring. A lot of times the steel was too close to the surface on older construction. Even today it's happening, but it was more so back then when there was less inspections and oversight. You're always going to get cracks in concrete. There will always be spalling and corrosion. But however, yes, if waterproofing mitigates that problem, there are also things that could be done during, like, for instance, if money was no object, you would use stainless steel rebar in the buildings. You would never have a problem for reinforced concrete, or you could use a galvanized rebar, potentially for a little bit better, better than conventional, but it's all costly. So what ends up happening is even waterproofing gets value engineered out of a new development. And so you just get bare concrete exposed to the elements, and concrete cracks, water penetrates, and inevitably you get corrosion within that time frame, hence that 20-year cycle. 15 to 25 years, I think buildings start seeing some kind of damage, whether it's edge damage, depending on the slab thickness too, is the amount of active corrosion that's happening in the slab. And we've got a few different projects where we've had very thin slabs right on the intercoastal. The building is about 25 years old. Extensive active corrosion within that slab, because even though it hasn't spalled yet in some areas, some of the edges are damaged. I mean, there's a lot of active corrosion occurring. It's just naturally going to occur. So again, every one of these questions you could spend, whatever, half an hour getting into the weeds with the details. So hopefully that is
But
enough on that one.
no, that was good. And I think that this is a nice, this might be a good transition question, as we want to get into, like concrete restoration, the projects and what it looks like. But to talk about the budgeting aspect, this question reads, can you speak to how engineers are collaborating with reserve specialists to help managers, boards, and associations properly budget so the funds are available for this critical and necessary restoration work?
We haven't, we do some reserve studies ourselves. We're not like that's the only thing we do. I think part of the problem with that is there's so many different trades, or let's say aspects to a reserve study, and it could be broad, right? I mean, if you want to do a full reserve study, you're talking about site, asphalt, landscape, roofing, for the building. We have one right now where the client has asked us to redo a reserve study that was done 2 years ago because they hired us to do a restoration project. So now we're going to update the reserve study for them, including the concrete repair work that's going to be occurring. So I don't have a perfect answer for that at the moment. I mean, the problem is I think there's so many people involved to bring them together to properly plan for all that's probably challenging. If I can just think off the cuff and say something, I would try to maybe focus on your biggest items and maybe bring in those contractors and ask them what the budget should be, and then have a conversation with your reserve specialist and say, hey, I talked to our elevator person and they said we're going to need to do this. So let's tack on such amount of money to that. And we talked to our irrigation guy and we need to replace the pump in 3 years, et cetera. So perhaps more of that's needed. So I don't know. I think that's probably as it pertains to this, you would talk to us, for instance, these can often be very large projects and costly. For an average building, it's anywhere from, let's say, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 per unit for a restoration, depending on the extent of damage, which again, another rabbit hole I can go down, and why you shouldn't wait forever to do these repairs. They need to go happen in cycles. But again, I'm not sure if I answered that question, but they're welcome to reach out to us with any questions too, if they have any. Is
Okay.
there any more for now?
There's lots of questions. However, I think that it might be more appropriate as we continue in the conversation to bring them up as we continue into the presentation.
Yeah, let's move on, and then but definitely I like the questions. We'll get to all of them. Hopefully, we should have no problem getting to all of them. So when we move on to the engineering work, we've talked about all this law and why this stuff's needed, how we got here, and so what is a phase two? Well, phase two is it's a structural condition assessment. It used to be just called that, but again, at Surfside Working Group, one of my colleague, we were on the phone together, said we do a phase one and a phase two. A phase one is a 40-year inspection. A phase two is if you fail the 40-year inspection, you do a phase two. Our company calls it a phase two, and that's all this was. So what is a phase two? It's a structural condition assessment. That's all it is. The state has put in certain requirements for it, but it's a structural condition assessment. They've outlined what they want included, but most engineers, we're already doing this stuff, essentially, structural engineers. So you do your site assessment. Remember that the intent of these is to determine to look with your eyes primarily, do you have any structural problems? That's mainly what it is. It's a visual. The acoustical sounding aspect of this is it's primarily for quantification, actually, not necessarily for part of the structural condition assessment per its definition, if you will. Acoustical soundings are yes, it can help identify problems, but it's mainly to quantify damage, and that's a big aspect. That's you've got the assessment itself, but you've also got the quantification survey that happens with it, so you can plan this project out. So it's important to understand why we're doing what. We use assessment sheets where we estimate the damage. I've got an example of that. The purpose is to come up with that quantity estimate using the acoustical soundings. So we have survey methods. Again, so the most common and cost-effective method of building survey is acoustical soundings. Believe it or not, it identifies the location of spalls, which are just chipped or fragmented pieces of, this is the formal definition, flake concrete pieces of stone or ore. The takeaway is a simple assessment technique is better for this work. And this is, again, this is to quantify the damage primarily. Again, we want to identify, if we go back to Surfside, for instance, Champlain Tower South, I mean, had an engineer gone in there and walked that property 2-3 weeks prior to it collapsing, hopefully they would have seen the deflection in the slab in the garage. And that's what I was trying to tell you all earlier, is that there's not, if there were no cracks at the columns, because remember too that the cracks, as the slab deflects, the cracks are on the tension side of the slab, which is on the top. You might see cracking at the middle of the span where the droop is at, but again, this is a visual inspection, looking around to see, what do I see here that's anomalous and does not look right. What did not look right there was there's major movement on that pool deck where uh, the um, um, the planter wall moved and there's a major crack in it. Had somebody with trained eyes, and maybe not so trained eyes, I actually wanted to mention this to as a takeaway as a whole for this thing is, I think all eyes are on deck. I mean, managers that are there all day, every day, unit owners that are on this presentation, keep a keen eye to what's going on. I mean, the engineers that, they're there for a tiny amount of time. How do they see these things? So again, I'm trying to not to go too far off on a tangent, but the structural condition assessment is primarily visual. Do we see any problems? Had we were at Champlain Tower South prior to class, we would have potentially seen that crack in that planter wall. Maybe we would have seen a 1 to 2 inch deflection in that slab. Hopefully, it would have triggered something that said we got a problem here. My concern with Surfside is there was a lot of hidden, it was almost like a perfect storm. But bringing all that back to this slide, the acoustical soundings, if we were at Surfside, they wouldn't have revealed much. The purpose of this is quantification. So I don't want to go too far off on a tangent with this, but I think there's a lot of confusion that people think that we're using a hammer to do an assessment. In reality, it's to quantify the damage, not to say whether there's a structural problem or not, if that makes any sense. There are other survey methods. GPR, impact echo, corrosion mapping, X-ray is one that came up not too long ago. We'll talk about tile on balconies, but one of these buildings had tile on its balconies. I said, I can't see through tile. We need to take up the tile to investigate the concrete. And by the way, tangent nugget here, boards and unit owners don't want to hear that. Oh, they don't want their tile damaged. The tile becomes more important than the structure supporting the tile. I mean, so that's another thing that doesn't make any sense in all this. But X-rays, if we did X-ray, X-rays available, but look at the example here, a 100-unit building, the balconies are about 10 by 20. The X-ray company wanted $15,000 per balcony. It sort of cost at about $1.5 million. It would have taken 1 week per balcony to do the assessment, or 100 weeks in total. So a lot of stuff, a little bit of a takeaway here is that one of them is more sophisticated methods don't always provide enough valuable info for the extra cost. And it could create a much more expensive repair project. I think big takeaway, there are methods to do things, but sometimes they don't make any sense. And in the end, you're better off the simpler method ends up being simpler, but also cheaper in cost. There are other survey methods too, including dynamic response load testing. We did this on one of our buildings we worked on. This was a 4-story building. And these were, I'm sorry, 4-story buildings. And the company that we hired, what they do is they use equipment to test basically the sway, how the buildings are swaying. And this is a plan view of one of the buildings. They're long rectangular buildings. And they found that one side of the building was actually moving more than the other. It was actually rotating. And what it does is it actually is a way to obtain a load test. And so it's testing for doing global load testing on the entire building to see its stability and so on. So this is something we used on one of the buildings. This is obviously very technical. It's a whole different animal. It wasn't terribly expensive, and I think we may be seeing more of this in the future on overall stability and the overall. What this does too, it allows you to monitor the building. So if you did it every 10 years, you can test the stability over time of the building. So if you did it, again, every 10 years, let's say you did it for every repair cycle, you might obtain information that the building is weakening over time, and you got to find the problems and why it's weakening. Why it could be columns, could be shear walls, etc. So that is another type of test that we're doing. This is what we do for the example survey sheet. So we'll note problems that we see. And again, a lot of this is for quantification. Just it tells us where are the problems at. A big component of this is quantifying the damage to prepare a project. And by the way, that's not necessarily a phase 2 per what the state says. A phase 2 is simply a report, an inspection and a report. It's not a quantification survey. This is planning for the project. So what you get oftentimes from us and probably other engineers is this whole package that includes a phase 2. Okay. I'm kind of getting in the weeds a bit, and y'all are welcome to send me questions if you have any on it. I can get more detailed about it. Load testing. So my opinion is that load testing is the best way to truly determine if damaged concrete should be repaired or not. Okay, because there's a possibility, can a balcony slab carry the design live and dead loads in its current damaged state? So you may have spalling on let's say a balcony slab or this garage. This is an example too, by the way, from a presentation by American Concrete Institute. I just took a screenshot. But we would never pay, clients would never pay for every balcony to be water tested or load tested like this. In some cases, it wouldn't make any sense. There's a possibility we could do a percentage of balconies, but again, it's too costly to do in every balcony that has a spall, for instance. And so we take the approach of doing the repairs. We're going to discuss this a bit later on. Another important nugget is let's say there are repairs there, and we did do a load test, and the load test revealed that the current balcony slab can support the design live and dead loads currently. What's important to note is that corrosion is still occurring. So although it works today, it may not work a year from now. So in the end, what's the point of spending all the money on a load test to verify that it may work today if you're going to have to do repairs down the road? I'm trying to get to the point of this is to answer all questions that may be coming in from all angles from owners. Why don't we do this? Can we do that? Can we do? Because this happens all the time. They see us walk on jobs with golf clubs, and they think it's a joke. They think we're a joke. And believe me, our thinking is a lot more complex than one might think. You get a lot of opinions out of the gate when we walk on a job site with golf clubs, thinking that we don't know what we're talking about. Nothing can be further from the truth. There's a reason why we do what we do. And this is just another look at the rabbit hole of saying, hey, even if we did do something such as a load test, does that even make any sense? If you got inevitable concrete repairs happening, you still need to do repairs. So repair quantity estimation, it's very difficult, but it's important. The strength and durability is what we're doing, right? So we want to we're damage quantities are determined based on structural integrity and concrete longevity and durability. Um, the why of it is any concrete that is spalled must be removed and replaced. Again, this is an engineering mechanics topic that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But again, I kind of the load test thing is a little bit of a look at it from a little bit of a deeper angle. It's like even if that thing could support the load, shouldn't we repair it because it's going to continue to break down anyway? The estimate's the actual volume of concrete that requires removal and replacement, okay? And that's basically what we're estimating the scope of the project. And we often put ratios on whatever we estimate in the field. And again, that's totally different for every engineer, this contingency number. For one engineer, maybe it's a 0.5, for another, maybe it's a 10. And it all has to do with who's doing the assessment, what is their training, what's their approach to doing the assessment, how are they quantifying the damage when they're out in the field, what is their knowledge base, how much experience do they have of actually doing concrete repair projects and understanding where damage is at during a project. In order for people to understand this stuff, they really need to have numerous iterations of full cycle from the assessment through 100% completion. And only then do you get to see, was my assessment accurate and what should I have done differently on the next project? And only through numerous cycles of that do you understand what shows up during these projects. Unit price versus lump sum. These projects are primarily unit price based. It's too risky for the engineer or the GC to go lump sum because the quantities are not known. It's just too risky. So, yeah, we've heard of, I know there was a couple of cases where, one in particular, where an engineer was actually sued where the project, they wanted to go lump sum, they meaning probably the board and the contractor, and the quantities went over the engineer's estimate, and then the engineer got sued. But in the end, a project is as one successful project is where everybody wins. I know Siobhan likes that, so that's maybe an inside
Yeah.
joke. Yeah. Anyway, demand versus capacity. This kind of ties back to my load test example too. How many holes can be in a slab or column or beam before its capacity is less than its demand? Again, what if you had 100 holes in a slab, but it still can support the code demand, meaning the code live load. Let's say it's 40 pounds per 60 pounds per square foot for a balcony, and some kind of dead load superimposed like tile. But what we're doing is we're looking at that to do our repairs. So this is my cheesy engineering slide. It's the demand versus capacity discussion. So when we're speaking of repairs, we're talking demand versus capacity. Okay, and so per the ACI 562, which is the concrete repair code, capacity must be greater than equal to demand. Okay, so demand is all dead loads plus FBC, the Florida Building Code live loads. And so there, of course, we're always talking about the the live loads are in the code, okay, and then dead loads would be dead like the weight of the concrete, and then superimposed loads like tile, etc. Um, but imagine that each time you see a corroded rebar or a spall as a hole in the slab, and the hole is 5 times bigger than just the area of corroded bar. So what that means is like, I'm sure you've the tip of the iceberg analogy where you see a corroded bar, but in reality, the damage is much more, right, than that. So what you have is each time you see a spalled area is a hole, and you can only have so many holes until you have nothing left, right? I mean, it's just common sense. And so how many holes can you have before the thing no longer the capacity of the slab no longer meets the demand, or the capacity of the column no longer meets the demand, or what the applied load is. So I'm going to get more into this. The takeaway here is that the mechanics occurring in repairs is very complex, and therefore experience in structural design is the most important expertise your building engineer should have. It's something which architects or contractors have no training or expertise in typically. This is important if you tie it back to the Surfside analysis, the NIST analysis that we went over earlier. Who did that? Who did that present? Those were not architects or contractors. Those are structural engineers. They weren't civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. They're structural, highly qualified, experienced, educated structural engineers. And that's why I have this point here is that it's so critical that, and it's so critical that we have structural engineers doing this work. That's why you primarily see engineers doing this work. Okay. That's why Surfside Working Group recommended that the person doing the phase two is a structural engineer with 10 plus years of experience doing design, structural design. There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it because you've got to have that trained eye to understand what's going on. Again, that's a deep, I could go down that one for a while. But it's interesting how I thought to myself earlier today, yesterday, when I was updating these slides, that how much this slide ties into NIST and how the whole thing's a big cycle in the concrete repair world and restoration world and in our area and everywhere else. It's that the structural engineer is the one really that has the most expertise needed to do this work. And I'm not trying to tout myself. I'm just saying that that's the truth. That's the truth, and I'm trying to point that out. I want to point that out to you all, the public, that that's important to understand. It's not just anybody. And the study that was, NIST study is, I mean, very complex work. I mean, again, I can go down the rabbit hole on this and spend a lot of time on it, but I think it's beyond the scope of this. It's getting more into a presentation for engineers.
Carmelo, there's a question here that I want
Sure.
us to clarify regarding, and before I share the question, also want to do a time check, 1:22. I'd really like to be able to get into like concrete restoration projects and what they can expect. But this question
Looks like
reads,
we're not going to have a problem with our
the
time.
time. Yeah. So really quick to clarify, this question reads, doesn't the contractor need to have the basic quantities designated by the engineer to determine his bid?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's why we've had plenty of I mean, I can't tell you how many times I think people are being trained more with time. Without a doubt, things have changed significantly since Surfside collapse, Champlain Towers South. But yes, I mean, contractor's job is not to come up with quantities. That's the engineer's responsibility. And so your engine, again, I've seen all kinds of stuff. And the package that you get from one engineer is different than what you're going to get from another engineer if they don't have the experience of doing the work. I'm trying to say that a phase two theoretically doesn't have any quantities in it. Because if you look at the state's definition of what a phase two is it's just it's a condition assessment. A condition assessment is a visual look at the building, testing if needed, and a report stating deficiencies, et cetera, what's going on. It doesn't say anything about assessment sheets, quantities, how much it's going to cost to do the work. That's not theoretically what a phase two is. What we do as experienced engineers is we put it all into one package because that's what the association needs. And if we get too far into the weeds of trying to explain it, there's a lot of times where we explain too much and we overcomplicate things, and the other teams are not doing that, and we get overlooked because we're too complicated. And so, but absolutely, it's the engineer's responsibility to put the quantities together, and they're the ones doing the assessment, and identifying where the problems are at and how to, where to fix them. So.
Yes, and to echo that point is, that's why I really value, what we do in our firm and is a common practice for us for our clients and our prospects is, we have that conversation with them. We get them on the phone and we hear what their needs are. We go out to the site to do our proposal consultation and help really identify the scope of work, because sometimes they think that they need A based on something that they saw or something that they heard. So really taking the time for all of the managers and boards that are on here today to have the conversations with the licensed professionals, get really clear, so that way you are equipped to move forward in the direction that is best for the association and your needs. So always having those conversations, which I really value that we do that here. It's one of my favorite things that we do. But also I want to go to the next question is, pre-stressed concrete, any dangers for inexperienced persons trying to make repairs?
Well, the one thing that's complicated about pre-stress is that it's like you can have a pre-stressed beam. It's like joists. You often see your parking garages have pre-stressed concrete. And what it is they pull, it's like it's similar to post tensioning. It's a tension cable, but it's within the concrete. And so they pour concrete around the cable. And that locks in the tension. And then once it's done, the cable wants to return to normal. And what it does is it puts compression into the concrete, and that stiffens it up and makes the beam, if you will, able to resist more load because there's compression in it. What's complicated about is if you take all the concrete around the cable, it removes the tensioning in the cable. So yes, it's a good question, and you can render a pre-stressed beam useless if you remove all the concrete around it. I think that's a very complex repair that I think is probably potentially not being done and correctly in a lot of cases, because of you can't remove all the concrete around a pre-stressed cable, otherwise it will no longer be pre-stressed. So it's different than post-tensioning, where the cable is can move freely inside the slab, where it's wrapped in a sheath. So again, I can go down a rabbit hole on that one too, but hopefully that's enough for now.
Yeah.
Do you
And
have
so
any?
Carmelo, I want to do very quickly a time check. It's 1:27.
We
Just
have time because there's a lot of slides, and we got to go to basically 2 o'clock to get our 145. So we need to go about another half hour or so. Do you have any more questions right now?
We have a few. Here's one. Additionally, I would appreciate your thoughts regarding the cooling towers located on the roof of the building. Do you have any concerns about their condition or performance? Also, could you please provide your opinion on the roof design, particularly in relation to areas where water tends to accumulate due to the roof type?
Well, I'm not really sure what the question is regarding cooling towers. Typically, they're built with steel frame, and a lot of times they corrode. Um, there's always some type of steel element I mean, 90% of the time in the buildings I've seen, there's typically not sitting on concrete columns or beams. It's steel, and they always break down and corrode. I've been on a number of projects where we've had to replace the steel. I mean, I can't even count right now. It's been a lot. Happens a lot. So I'm not sure if that answers the question. Again, that person's welcome to reach out with any questions. And then as far as a question regarding ponding of water, again, that's kind of the way it's presented is vague. Maybe it's not intended that way, but I mean, like for instance, we're working on a project right now. Something new in the code for roofs is the roofing must have positive drainage, and I've seen on a number of jobs like coal tar roofs can be flat, but there's a lot of roof types like modified systems that are supposed to have a pitch on them and they don't, and then that causes a problem with water ponding, damage to the uh to the granules and the sheets, etc., and it causes other problems. So I'm not sure where that question is going, but that person is welcome to reach out to us with their questions. I'd be happy to get on a phone call or email or whatever and get the real meat of what they're asking for. So
Okay. I like this question. It says, per my prior Miami Beach MI timeline, which I believe is milestone inspection, where can we as board members get real answers to appropriately prepare for our milestone inspections?
And call us. Um, I'm not sure. Again, it's another question. I'm not sure if you would talk to people that are doing milestone inspections, like engineers like us. I mean, and they would hopefully be able to answer the questions. Again, I will point out that it could be off topic, but brought the example of where the system, I think Miami and Broward are doing a better job at it because that's what they've done in the past, is like if you need repairs, do them. And by the way, that's just another takeaway for any managers and owners out there is it's a takeaway from this presentation should be, just because your engineer, if you just use common sense, if you got spalled concrete around your building and some engineer comes in and says you passed the phase one, go ahead and do the repairs. I mean, this is that objectivity that I'm talking about. It's like you've got to put money to the side and say, does this make any sense? I see cracks, I see problems. Why are we not doing repairs? I mean, literally have that example when the law changed. We went to Boca to do an interview. The guy had a construction background. He said, Carmelo, this engineer passed this building. Look at all this work we need to do. Why do they pass the inspection? I said, you asked a great question. I mean, that's the problem we have. We have this law that says if you don't have substantial structural deterioration, then you can pass the inspection. So Siobhan, you and I have done in-person presentations where I asked the question to I should have done this during that section, but I asked the audience, if I have to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, what is substantial structural deterioration? Is it a 1 meaning no damage or like absolutely perfect, and a 10 being like literally ready to collapse? I asked managers that were there and I said, what number would you give? And I've heard anything from like 2 to maybe 8. 8 meaning like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad, we have really bad, and 1 being not bad at all. So, you know, some managers don't really have a good feel for that number. My opinion is, if I had to just, again, without thinking about it too much, what is substantial structural deterioration? It's like a 7 or an 8. It's a major problem. And by the way, there's another definition called substantial structural damage in the codes that basically is the same thing. And so when this definition was brought up at the state level at the House, they wanted to use substantial structural damage, not substantial structural deterioration. And my colleague, who was in the Surfside Working Group, said we can't use that definition because it's already used. You got to use a different definition, and that's where substantial structural deterioration came from. So let me ask you, I know you can't respond to me, maybe you can via chat or whatever, but does it make any sense to you that we're protecting the public by saying your building is safe until it's not? In other words, it's ready to collapse. We're going to say it's safe until it's right on the verge of being a 7 or 8 or a 9. Let me ask you that as to the audience. Does that make any sense to you whatsoever? Hopefully it doesn't, because it doesn't to me, and that's why I have so many slides in this presentation on it. It's completely ridiculous. So I know that's a bit of a tangent, but I'm glad I had an opportunity to remember it and bring it up, because that's really that's the gist of it. We have a system right now with substantial structural deterioration that says, I'm going to pass your building if that engineer interprets that 7, 8, 9 level. That engineer is going to pass your building and say it's safe, potentially when it's right on the verge of collapsing, if you will, or a 7, 8, a 9 and damage. Does that make any sense? That's the takeaway from that whole conversation about substantial structural deterioration. So, Siobhan, that was a little bit of a tangent, but I had to talk about that. It just
That's
doesn't make
okay,
any
Peggy.
sense.
You have a question?
It's more of a comment, and that is, over past 5 years, especially since this collapse happened, just in the webinars in general, I'm seeing where smaller communities don't have a building department staff that can accommodate uh, the better judgment of a structural engineer. So I just wanted to make a recommendation. I don't know if you support this or not, but if you don't have an engineer, structural engineer in the building department of your township or small city or whatever, at least go by the guidelines of Miami-Dade, because they're the ones that have set the guidelines pretty much for the industry. Is that correct, Carmela?
Well, so the most municipalities don't have a licensed PE on staff. A licensed, say, structural engineer. Some of them may be PEs, but some are maybe not trained enough or something. A lot of times they're building code people, they licensed building code officials or plan reviewers, et cetera. So it's different types of people. In that regard, not engineers, not structural engineers. Some of the municipalities have SEs on staff, but not a lot. To answer your question, but Peggy, really, Miami, there's nothing to go by really. They have their forms, the boilerplate form that we need to complete, but it's the engineer doing the work that says whether it's safe or not. Okay, and so Miami-Dade does have staff, and Broward has staff that potentially could help people. But I think that a lot of the municipalities are up to speed now at this point on the recert program, even smaller ones. Like I know Highland Beach, I know the building official there. He's they know a lot, and so you know so anyway, I'm not sure how to answer that question other than I did, Miami-Dade may or may not be, and again, are you talking about Miami-Dade County? You're talking about different municipalities. There's a lot of municipalities down there, like smaller townships, et cetera.
I
But
just thought they set the guidelines for the state of Florida.
no, no,
Okay.
no, no, the guidelines were set by the legislature, and then the legislature, actually, it's not a guideline, it's law. They do have their research documents that, boards and managers can look at potentially and triangulate data to see, to get a better understand the whole process. But ultimately it comes down to, from the structural perspective, is the building safe or not? That it's, I mean, does it need repairs or does it not? And that's really the premise. That's what we're supposed to. That's what we're trying to get to. Has the building broken down with time? If it hasn't, then it's safe. Like Surfside, had it not broken down, Champlain Tower South, I mean, there's probably a good possibility it it would still be there if there wasn't corrosion. So yes, they added load to the pool deck with planters, but if there wasn't corrosion, it probably would still be there. So the main point of all this is, how has the building broken down with time? Has it broken down or not? And inevitably, it seems to happen with reinforced concrete structures because, like the question earlier, with cracks, et cetera, spalling is inevitable. Unless you're in a vacuum or there's no water, at all, zero, or there's no steel in the concrete, by the way. People bring up, Rome and these ancient structures or ancient concrete structures that are still there. The Pantheon in Rome is still there, a dome structure. Well, there's no steel in it. There's no rebar, so it's not going to spall. And so, there's also, why aren't we doing that today? Well, it's extremely inefficient. You've got developers don't want to use arches anymore to build because it's extremely inefficient. And now we're doing post-tension slabs that are 6 inches thick. So the whole point is you can get more floors and you can go with longer spans. So between columns, so you're using less material overall. It's about, comes down to money and other things. I mean, if you have an acre of property on, whatever, on the Intracoastal in West Palm Beach, how much structure can you get on? How much sellable space can you get in there to build it? So again, another tangent, but Siobhan, are there any more questions?
There's lots of questions, but I think that
Let's go on a little further and then let's
yeah,
stop
exactly.
and okay, so I think we talked about corrosion. So this is, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but regarding corrosion, it doesn't stop, right? So this is important. When we use waterproofing, we can slow it down. But once the corrosion starts, it doesn't stop. And so what I've anecdotally, I've noticed that, when the building is, let's say, zero age, obviously it doesn't have anything yet, but then as breakdown and cracks occur, you start to get this corrosion cycle that happens, and you might see some minor repairs at, let's say, 15 years. Okay, sometimes on newer post-tension structures, you'll see a cable pop, a couple of cables. You might see some edge spalls, and this relates to not 558 stuff where there was construction defects from the beginning, but I'm talking primarily about corrosion. So you might get edge spalls, not a lot, just a little bit, and then with time, what I've noticed is that when you get to that like 30-year-old building mark, the corrosion, it moves exponentially, it seems. So in other words, from 30 to 40 years of age, I think, again, anecdotally, we've seen collapses in that window. I think what happens is you have significant corrosion between that, let's say, 25 to 30-year mark and that 40-year mark. And if it's not mitigated, it obviously can be a problem, as we've seen. And that's why we need more repair cycles to mitigate the process to repair the concrete, restore its cross section, et cetera. So corrosion will happen inevitably if there's steel. I mean, it's an absolute guarantee. When we're talking about repairs, so this is an example where we design repairs, hopefully that they last long. It's not just a structural conversation. Will the repair last? Kind of ties into my load test example earlier where, yeah, the slab might work with some spalls on it for the demand, the capacity might still work, but at what point does it not work? And you're always going to have corrosion. It's going to inevitably occur. And so what you want to do when we're designing repairs is eliminate islands. And I'm having a problem with my cursor here. This island here in the middle, so in the final repair, we would have removed this and gotten rid of that and just leave this full length here. If you notice here, these hook bars, this was cut because it was right on the edge, and that kind of caused the problem there. And then this over here was a post pocket that let in water to the slab, and that started the corrosion there. But what you have is this electrical chemical process corrosion, and you have a halo effect that occurs where the new and old concrete, that old concrete wants to spall faster once the new concrete is there. All the electrochemical process cycle goes through the new to the old concrete. There's like a pH differential as well. The new concrete coats the steel, and it keeps the corrosion from occurring. So the ICRI recommends to some degree removing concrete until you have clean steel. This is, again, some of this is anecdotal and engineer decision on how far to extend concrete beyond the structural damage, beyond the spalled area. This is an example of tile on balconies, how it can hide spalled, spalled concrete and rusted bars. So this also all comes up on every project when there's tile on the balconies. We recommend that tile be kept off of the balconies. Another thing I'm saying, like I said, is unpermitted work. Again, it's kind of a lengthy slide, but so after a phase one inspection, some associations attempt to perform repairs without the engineer oversight. This violates the intent of the inspection process and leads to covered up damage, uninspected repairs, and unpermitted construction. So a phase one is not a repair protocol. If damage is found, the engineers must provide specs for the repairs. So this kind of ties into my example where I said that one municipality where we passed the phase one, even though repairs were needed, they needed a scope of work to do the repairs to get a permit with a licensed general contractor. You can't get a permit without structural construction documents, and you need an engineer for the structural construction documents. So I don't know what this association did, how they did the repairs we told them they had to do. So all repairs must be permitted. Most municipalities require a permit for work exceeding 2,500. Palm Beach County, we called them on one little job. They said that they required a permit on any project of any size if it was commercial. So, these multi-story residential was in there. Maintenance staff should not be doing repairs on structural components, especially threshold buildings. Takeaway, if a phase, what is this? If a phase one conducts a second more, if a phase one fails, conduct a second more thorough inspection, develop specs, oversee the permitted construction process. Sorry, there's a little some typos in there. This what I was trying to convey earlier is that you've got, if the phase one can pass or fail, but if you need repairs, do the repairs. Again, think objectively and don't try to outsmart things. The thing that I'm telling you, this was a municipality we reached out to. It blew my mind that I reached out to the building official of the town and asked him, how are these people supposed to do repairs without engineering? He never even got back to me. I don't know what happened with this community, but this is something that we're dealing with. It's like, I don't know. I'm left scratching my head as to how to deal with it. But you need, if you got repairs, you need a permit. In order to get a permit, you need structural design. Also, stuff is structural, so they shouldn't be doing any work without an engineer's oversight. I mean, I could go on and on with this stuff. Some of it just simply doesn't make any sense. Siobhan, let's pick up a couple more questions while we're here at Project Manual. You there?
All right. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I think it's, sorry, I'm having a glitch here. Okay. I think we'll go ahead and move forward. There's one here about tile. It says if no tile is allowed on the balconies, what can be used that is easy to clean? Are there any expectations for first floor balconies?
Well, we often use some type of waterproofing, be it urethane or cementitious, and then some type of spray deck. And it's typically easy to clean and maintain, and that's most commonly used. First floor balconies, if they should not have waterproofing. You've got to differentiate whether the first floor is structural or not, but even if it is structural, because it doesn't allow vapor to pass underneath on the bottom side because there's soil there. You don't want to put waterproofing on the first floor. It causes other problems, including bubbling, et cetera, of the waterproofing. So that's kind of it. Again, if you have any questions, just reach out on that. Are there any more questions right now, Siobhan?
Yeah, there's actually two that I want to get into.
All
So
right.
it says in your professional experience with a late 1960s Miami-Dade lakefront 3-story condo structure, foundation on grade, concrete block, stucco, located 3 to 4 miles from the ocean, is there an accepted service life for concrete slabs? And then it goes on to say they're pretty much asking, which I think we went over this in the previous slides. It says, in other words, is there a concrete service like rule of thumb when your concrete gets to a certain amount of years that it should be repaired regardless of its immediate condition?
So typically properties west of, further out west, that 3 mile threshold or line is in, in the statutes. But the further west you go, the less salt you have, and you're going to see corrosion. It should be less though. And what I've seen is if you have like a 60-year-old building, there's a possibility, even though it's west of town, you have a lot of corrosion. It's a very good possibility. A lot of it has to do with the construction at the time it was done too. There are so many factors involved, but there's a good possibility the thing has damage, even though it's only three. The story height doesn't matter. I mean, you saw the example in Broward's research program where, a 2-story hotel had a balcony that collapsed. Now that was on the ocean, but still, the height doesn't matter. The whether it's on grade or not doesn't matter. What matters potentially is the balconies and how they're built. Are they form and poured concrete? Are they pre-stressed concrete, hollow core plank? What's the strength of the concrete? Is it 3,000 psi? We're doing a project in Boca right now that we found honeycomb concrete on the walkways we had to replace. We found concrete with 1,500 psi concrete, which is unacceptable. Should be in the 3,000 range, whether it was done in 1950 or even whatever today. That's that kind of basic number that should be there. And actually, the code has what it should be if you don't do testing, the ACI 562 code. So again, I could go off on just all kinds of stuff. Hopefully, that answers some of their questions. But the bottom line is, though, like I said, use common sense, and you obviously you need to do research cycles. So use common sense, and if you see damage, fix it. I mean, that's it. I mean, don't be objective about it. That if you're a board member or a manager, right? You have that. If you're a board member, you have that fiduciary requirement to protect the building, and so protect the public, your people in your building. So just use common sense. I mean, if you see damage, bring in an engineer. It's just don't shy away from it. You never know. I know it's a rarity, but it could be hiding a problem. We found on this example in Boca. I'm telling you, it's another tangent I could talk about for a long time. This building has a structural engineer lives in the building. The structural engineer told the association to go hire another engineer, get a second opinion on what we told them. They went and hired an engineer that doesn't do resto. They're not experienced in restoration engineering, concrete repair. They're a testing company. They do testing. It's a different type of company. This company came in, I kid you not, on an 80-unit building, said that there was literally 2 or 3 cubic feet of concrete column damage. I mean, it was a joke. I couldn't believe it. This is a licensed PE that wrote this on a building that's like 60 years old. You can't make this stuff up. We found honeycomb concrete on the walkways where the strength of the strength of the walkway certainly wouldn't work the because of the honeycombing. That our method of doing assessments uncovered it, which I know a lot of engineers aren't doing stuff as thoroughly as we are. But it's just I can go on and on about it. The point of that is just if you see something, say something. If you have an edge spall that happens a lot where there's railings, just get it repaired. Look, get some different opinions, from engineers, and don't always go with the low number. I had a slide in here because what happens is the board they see the engineer's number, they see it's high, they think the engineer doesn't know what he's talking about. They go hire some other guy. They'll go until they find somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, tells them, just like this example, tells them you don't have any work. And then next thing you know, you have all this other repairs if somebody else is looking at it with a keen eye. So there's so much stuff I can talk about through the years with experience, but if you see something, say something, use common sense, and then you're welcome to reach out to us with any questions. So hopefully that might have been another tangent, but Siobhan, are there any more?
So yeah, I think this is a good question that comes up a lot in conversation with boards and with managers. It says the process of having the engineer work on the scope of work once the contractor is selected, are there steps or stages when the engineer is available or required to oversee the contractor's work?
All the time. So whoever the engineer is on that job, my opinion, if they're not overseeing the work, they don't know what they're doing. I mean, if it's a threshold building, the building department requires that they be a special inspector on the job. They're taking the place of the building department. I specifically say we haven't gotten into this. We're getting to CANSI, but the engineer by the way, on threshold buildings, it's a special case. I have a threshold engineering license, a threshold inspection license. It's a special license. It's there for a reason. You can't get this license easily. There's only a few hundred threshold inspectors in the state. It takes years to get this license. So this question concerns me that they probably are not working with either, they're not working with an experienced engineer, or the board is really not versed in what they need to do, or if it's a manager, they need to be more versed. Absolutely, the engineer should be involved from start to finish with the work. They should be doing inspections in lieu of the building department. If it's a threshold building, it doesn't matter what building it is. The building departments don't do inspections on concrete repair work. They just don't. So they rely on the engineer to do that. So without a doubt, that alone, they need to be involved. But there's so much other stuff the engineer needs to do to make sure that the job doesn't go off the rails. I mean, there are so many things that can be said just by that alone that, I could spend a lot of time here talking about it. But anyway, again, if this person has any questions, they're welcome to reach out to us and I can share more. Hopefully that's
It's
not
a
a large building. Hopefully that's a small building, because if that's a large building, then they're going to be seeing potentially a lot of problems, if their engineer is not overseeing things. So yeah.
Okay. Um, I want,
Interestingly, we're at 156. So let's go ahead and ask those questions, and then let's see. We're kind of, I think we're almost done, Siobhan.
yeah. So what I would say is, there are lots of questions here, different questions that, we didn't really get to yet in the presentation, which is fine. But I think that it would be ideal for us to, with all of this in mind, I'd love to hear your closing comments, Carmelo, and really your advice for the property managers that are on this webinar and the board members. And, what do you think the best practices are for them as they prepare for their concrete restoration projects or building recertifications?
Well, interestingly, I was sliding through and see if I can find a slide that, uh, because there is a lot more information here during the part 4, which is the longest phase of the project during construction. It's hard for us to hit all that. I think we spend a lot of time on the front end because that's kind of where it's not understood, and there's so much of what we do that's not understood, and I could talk. We were talking before on expanding the class because what we need to do is break it up and do an hour segment for each section because there's so much information that I can share. I think takeaways would be, if you see something, fix it. That's a big takeaway. Again, going back to Surfside, had somebody seen the movement in the slab, that could have potentially, maybe it would have done something. Maybe not. But the trick is, again, when I watch that video, is how do we ensure that we're walking on a building and doing the best we can to make sure nothing, there's no damage there. So if you see something, do the work. The phase ones, again, if you fail a phase one or you pass a phase one, if you got to do work, do work. Remember, you need a building permit. So whoever's saying you don't need one, that's not true. Those are some takeaways. Siobhan, I could go on and on about it, but there's so much stuff that we can talk about. I mean, this is a slide out on special inspections and CA, et cetera. But we had a construction admin versus construction management. Contractor is responsible for means, methods, techniques, sequences, and procedures. There's so much that we can talk about. Perhaps, Peggy, we need to do a part 2.
I will bring you back. This is
Where
very
we
good
talk
information.
about CA, the C part 4 of the project, which is the construction aspect. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, one item that is very valuable that we just did a newsletter on is the timelines, right?
Yeah.
So like
That's a good
we
point.
got questions about, like Miami Beach municipality was saying I don't have to get my my milestone for 30
Yep.
years, and like if they have capital projects coming up or they know they're going into a larger project, I would like for you to share that timeline because, we talk to plenty of boards and managers, and sometimes they wait last minute or they just don't know. And then they realize like we have an issue, I need to take care of this. And then, they reach out and it's like, okay, yes, we can help. And the
Yeah.
reality is we're 6 months out to boots on the ground if everyone does exactly what they're supposed to do on time.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of steps from hiring the engineer. Then the engineer has to do the physical field assessment. That's about a month. Then you got to take that data back, get we like to do our bid estimate, get our quantities assembled, and then get the assessment sheets. We get them to the board and the manager and have them review the scope of work we plan and the quantities in our project estimate. And that usually is a big discussion time. That could go on for a month and they're going back and forth. Well, what's the scope of work? Why do we need to do this work, etc. But assuming that all goes well, maybe part one, which is the assessment, and then part two, we have the project manual. That's another whatever month or so. So you're talking at least 2 months between part one and part two. Then you have procurement, and this is where the time really adds up. You bid the job out, which doesn't take long, maybe 2 weeks. You do a pre-bid invite, go to the job with the project manual, explain the job to the contractors. They come back 2 weeks later with their bids. We open the bids with witnesses, etc., and then the bids start being reviewed. You got to interview, etc. But that process can take 2, 3, 4, 5 months. In that process is also selecting the contractor, okay? But then there's the attorney's got to review the contracts. We found that's taken a long time. I mean, the attorneys are taking like 2 weeks each cycle. So one guy writes the agreement, attorney, then the next one reviews it. He doesn't get back his comments for a month, 2 weeks. So now you lost a month. Then it goes back to the other attorney. That guy marks it up again. It's a month and a half. Back to the other attorney, it's 2 months. We've seen that cycle go on for 3, 4, 5 months. We've
Is
also seen, then you got a permit. Permitting is 2 months. So once the contract's signed, then the contractor needs to submit for permit. Now that's another 2 months. So just the engineering services, part one and part two is, let's say, a month. Then you've got procurement. We've got to add in 2 months there. It's going to be more than that, but just on a short timeline, that's 2 months. And then you got to get a permit. That's about 2 months. So you've got at least 6 months before you're starting work. And that, I believe, is a short timeline. For a major project, I doubt it's happening that fast. Very unlikely. So that is a big conversation, Siobhan. I thought I added that to this presentation, but perhaps I didn't. I know we did do a blast for that particular what you're saying. But were there any more questions?
well, I think that it's 2:02, so I know that Peggy typically has a hard stop.
Okay.
Yeah, but we just want to say thank you so much, Carmelo. Thank you to all of the managers and boards that were here today. We're happy to be of service. And Peggy, I'll just go ahead and hand it off to you.
yes, and I ditto or reiterate that. Thank you, Carmelo. It's very very important information. Again, Siobhan, you did a great job moderating. And thank you to the sponsors, the board members who are on today, and the managers. I just want to reiterate, though, that being on the board is such a responsibility. I think a lot of people, especially your new board members, are just getting broken when you see presentations like this to see what is the scope of the board member responsibility. And the laws have changed to the point that now board members actually have some direct responsibilities and liabilities. So, it would behoove all of you to get together on a regular basis during a project. I'd say every other week, monthly at minimum, as a complete board, meeting with these engineers and, just consulting and getting a full, understanding so that you don't fall short of understanding your own project right there. But being on the board is a huge responsibility, and my hat is off to all of you. You volunteer, And I'm trying to bring presentations to you. And I certainly would hope that, Carmelo, you come back maybe in a month and pick it up where you left off on these slides today and go forward with, continuing education if that's allowed. So we'll have to look into that. I do want to close by also mentioning a few events that are coming up or webinars. I have next week on Tuesday, I've got Vinteum coming back, and they're going to also discuss some technicalities about websites as well as hurricane preparedness. Again, that will be from 12 to 1 o'clock. That's on the 30th. In July, we've got a couple of events, actual in-person events. If you're in Broward County, I just found out that on July the 9th, the Broward Expo is also going to be there. They're going to have some excellent education classes too as well. It's a great day to get out, meet all the vendors you can. Now that board members have to get 3 bids for anything over $25,000 now in cost. On July the 10th, CAI Gold Coast chapter has a day of education. And I believe you guys are speaking, aren't you, Siobhan?
We will be there. We are one of the sponsors.
Okay,
so make sure you stop
absolutely.
by our booth. Yes.
Okay. And then I will have an education class on water restoration on July 14th. And then I've been asked, as of this morning, to please invite anyone again who's in the Palm Beach County area or can get to it to the Castle Group Management. It's called Educate to Elevate. It's another trade show specifically for project or property managers with Castle only. So if you're in town, that is going to be on July 23rd at the Marriott. If anybody needs information on that, please email me directly. I'll get you information on that as well. Past that, I do have some things in the works to be scheduled, but please have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.